Soul Live love and greetings, beautiful goddess sister. I'm going to respond to a few of your questions in this moment, specifically the mantras, okay? And there's a lot going on. I am totally chill and cool sitting in the lap of Ma in my tree. But I hear a dog barking in the background. There's the cranes, the cranes that are kind of coming in and pitching in. So hopefully this comes through easily for you. The first thing I want to say about mantras, okay, and this is speaking to the aspect of ourselves that are encompassed in all that is, and all languages, and all that is. So that what's coming right now is Ekonkar. The creator and creation are one, right? The creator and creation are one. So I think what's happening is because there's also some aspects that are still really stuck in some old, outdated beliefs. Now, check it for yourself. Again, you hear me say this all the time, right? If it is not true for you, kick it. Do not take anything into your being and system that is not resonant. And at the same time, being able to hold the fact that there might be another option or another reality at play. And maybe you might be able to move forward with some of the resistance that's coming up within you. Okay, so let's just try it on for size. First of all, when you're singing Sanskrit mantras or Swahili or really, actually, let's bring it even to just a speaking, any language, there's things that come through and they access your subconscious mind, right? Which is why I think there's a benefit. A couple of the mantras that I sent to you, again, maybe it's not resonant as in like, okay, what is this? Does this go against my beliefs? Am I calling on a deity? This is where I want there to be some clarification for what mantras are, and actually what we're doing when we're singing, when we're chanting, we're incantating, we're bringing in the energy, we're calling to the divine aspect of ourselves. We are not calling on a specific god or deity outside of us. So this is true with anything. If you know for a fact that I am my I am presence and I am one with my mother, father, God, if you know that in wholeness, that is your truth, you are not calling on a deity outside of yourself. And so the same is true. Just because, say there's a mantra to, let's pick one. The Maha mantra, the Gayatri mantra, right? A lot of people know that, yeah? Om Bhurabhuva Swaha Tat Savitur Varenyam. You're calling on the power of the sun. You're calling on the energy of the sun that gives life to all things. You are not worshiping a deity, okay? So I think there's a little bit of discord where it comes, and then it's like, okay, I like this, and you've done that before. You've said, oh, I really like the sound of that. What is that mantra? And then what does that mean? So one of the ones that you had said and that I had sent through, it was Pavan Guru. It's literally saying breath is the guru, and we're calling on the breath from within. So in certain traditions, okay, the Holy Spirit, but it is your breath. It is activated by your aliveness. So boots on the ground, the being that you are, the cells, yourselves, which is your cells. You're communicating with them when you're chanting and when you're singing and when you're speaking. This is why it often comes out of my mouth. It's like, watch your language, right? Because if you're saying something and it literally is dismissive, disrespectful, if you would not speak to your beloved that way, if you would not speak to your child that way, you most certainly should never ever, 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 ever speak to yourself that way, your cells. And so to me, mantras are really a powerful, powerful tool to help us in singing to ourselves, to casting a spell on our own being, and being that we are made up of 70% water. You know, who is it? Emoto, the study that they did of like how when you talk to, whether it's a plant or water, I thought it was Emoto, that the crystals change, right? So you can say, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, or criticize, or anything in those ways. Your cells will receive it, and they will literally change form, right? So then the opposite is also true. I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Even in your being and body, and you're going through different things, radical acceptance is literally like, oh, okay, I see you. Yeah, even to the little aspect of myself that's maybe afraid or doing something, you're like, oh, isn't that cute? Okay, come on, love. And then speaking and casting a spell, right? Which to me, words are spells. So I don't care what language you're doing it in. It is important that there is word, sound, vibration, and we are programmable, right? It happens all the time. And so this is a lot of times what happens is there's a deprogramming that's happening, right? And so I think that's what's happening right now, is that there's a little bit of resistance within your being and your cells because you're thinking of God or the divine outside of you. So now if you're singing a mantra to Ganesha, say Ganesha, for example. Again, I'm taking Sanskrit because a lot of people know that. For me, there are so many languages that I sing and chant, because it's also what's resonant for me and my body. And also, as I've traveled different places, different parts, different parts of the land required different sounds, different vibrations, different languages. So it's just what it is. Yeah. And that's a whole other topic, but let me just kind of keep it focused here on the mantras. I think what can be helpful too is if you really understand that you're not praying to a deity. So Ganesha is known as the remover of obstacles, right? So this is where, again, if you bring in the story aspect and you realize that I'm wanting to remove these obstacles, there's some resistance that I'm coming up to within my being. One, the fact that Sanskrit is not your first language, there's a beauty to it. And the fact that you love this mantra to Ganesha, right? This is fantastic. The first time you heard it, you're like, what is this? What is this? And you want to sing it. You want to chant it. But then there's a little bit of resistance coming in, and then you see the form that Ganesha has taken, and you're thinking, so now, again, is this contradicting my the ancestors are the ones who are claiming Christianity in the ways that they do, and they're thinking now these are false gods. I am saying in this now moment that there is no other outside of your being. So in total wholeness, you are not worshiping an elephant being. You are calling on and invoking the aspect of yourself that knows how to remove obstacles, right? And so even though all the times that you've heard me say it, right? And sometimes when I'm repeating, right? Repetition is the empress of excellence. It is how we program ourselves, right? And you really shouldn't have to do it over and over and over if you can say it one time and you know it to be true. But if we're trying to access the subconscious parts of ourselves that are maybe going, no, I don't quite buy this, then maybe in English saying, I'm not afraid, I am powerful, I am something, there's a part of your being that's like, no, I call bullshit, that those words don't work. So sometimes I think it's a beautiful hack to be able to come in with a different language, right? So what that particular mantra is calling on. What is the essence, right? I'm calling on my, or in different traditions, okay, I'm calling on the energy of Sekhmet. What is Sekhmet about, right? It's the energy. It is not praying to a deity. It is not I don't recommend for anybody really, truly, honestly to call on deities. I don't think that's a great idea. I do think we can honor all the beings that exist, but at the same time, we honor that aspect of ourselves. So in it, there's a wholeness, there's oneness. So I just think, and the fact that Sanskrit as well is, I know when it first came into my field, and Sanskrit and Gurmukhi, came before a lot of the other ones because I had not yet been to some of the countries that then literally, like, why am I hearing these words? And it was coming in different languages, and I would just start speaking, and it would just come through the sound of my voice because it's what it is. There's vibrations that respond in different ways. But I'm speaking literally now, in this now moment, to the hack that by going in with another language, you're actually being able to access your subconscious in a different way. Because if part of you is saying no, and then you feel fear at the same time, you're feeling, I want to do this and this feels good, and I want to sing these words, but I'm feeling there's no power in it, and it's not removing my obstacles because there's a part of you that is not believing it, right? And I do think the mantras, especially when you're singing in a different language, it can bypass the subconscious in those ways, and it just goes straight in, right? So maybe again, this is where you're going to kick the fact that you are worshiping a deity or an energy outside of yourself. You are calling on an aspect of yourself. You are calling on the divine within you that is indestructible, that is fierce in the face of any obstacles that cannot be touched, right? So even when we're talking about fear, if you know with absolute truth and absolute truth, fear actually fears you. So then at the end of the day, you wouldn't even really have to go on and on of like, okay, and build that up. But because we are these human beings that really are unlearning, we're deprogramming all the time. And it's important. And if you can find joy in it, this is why I love to sing and chant. And even when I don't know the languages, many times as I've traveled, I use the sound of my voice to clear my cells, to clear my body, to clear a room, to clear it. It's what is. So if you know then also the power of your word, the power of your voice has the ability to cancel out some of those, the thought forms that are trying to attach, right? It can be a fun play, so play with that. And that's where, again, the one that you love in particular, Pavan Guru, breath is the guru. It's, the translation is, from beyond the beyond, calling like the breath, it's Holy Spirit. So again, sometimes it's just semantics with words. And at the same time, I totally understand, understand how sometimes there's a nice little hack if you can use in a different language. And I've done this. So now again, I'm just going to bring in a little bit of my kind of storytelling because that's just how I flow, how I be. And I understand that you can extract the jewels that are meant for you and kick what's not. So your belief systems, right? I had an experience one time, and I remember when we were back in the United States, it was after Indonesia, and I had reopened my practice, and I started doing Kundalini yoga. And the woman who was teaching the class, a beautiful soul, beautiful, beautiful goddess. But again, when I show up in any space, I show up in the fullness of who I am, right? One of the things that I loved about Kundalini yoga is the ability to use the breath, and also certain mudras I really resonate with that because I use my voice. I use my hands. It's what it is. And when she was singing and she brought her harmonium, I remembered singing with her in temples many, many lifetimes, right? I resonated with the sound of her voice. But as time went on and we got to speak about different things and we kind of, here's this, my being is, I am absolutely a child of God, Goddess Absolute, but in this particular form, I am Mama Africa. I bring through such strong energetic waves. And her, when she was sitting across from me and we would be singing, she was in all white. And specifically, only vegetarian, vegan, all the things. And she just had such radiance in her being. And at the same time, she carried a lot of distortions in her field with regard to the rules. And so mantras, and she would say, because again, I may have practiced, I practice many things, right? But I don't take what is not for me. And I remember at a certain point we were speaking about she was having some issues and she was losing her hair and her hormones and stuff. Like a lot was out of balance. And I was just asking her some questions. And I kind of could see that when you go back to what her beliefs were, even when she was singing some of the mantras, she'd say, I can't leave the house. Like even when you get in your car, you have to say this mantra 6 times before or you could get into a car accident. Like she had a lot of and this sometimes happens even in the NewCage movement. Like there's a lot of dogma that is superimposed on the practice. So then it starts to take on a whole life of its own. And when we were talking about her, my way is a lot of times I ask questions because it's also that's an innocence for me because I'm not quick to take on somebody else's practice or different things if it doesn't resonate. So even some of the mantras that I was learning from her, I only wanted the ones that I wanted to learn. Do you know? I didn't want all of them. Like there was a protection mantra. Which is also probably beautiful in its own right when you just break down the translation, but where she had taken it in the form of if I didn't say this mantra and I got into a car accident that day because I didn't say this mantra. Well, then you as this program, this sentient, powerful creator also are somewhat responsible for thinking that, okay, you have to do all these steps that also take a lot of time. If you can do it in a short amount of time, or even the practice when you're working with a specific mantra, you work with it until literally you feel your cells have taken it to a point of, that's my truth. Now it's just part of me. I am presence and I am one with my mother, father, God, wholeness. You can say it with one word if you know it to be true. But if there's a part of your subconscious that then your teacher is saying to you, you have to, what was it? It was Ad Gure no Me, Jugad Gure no Me, Sat Gure no Me, Siri Guru Deve Name, Ad Sach Jugad Sach Chebe Sach Nanaka Hose Be Sach, Ad Gure, and repeat. And you have to do this before you get in the car, before you do this. I don't know. Maybe if you're working and you're wanting to just have that direct communication with your cells and say, okay, this is what we're working on right now. I want to really bring in this level of I am presence, armor of God, totally be one with all that I am always protected. Wherever I go, my I am presence that is activated within me, fully online and in tune, can walk out the door and not have to say and do a bunch of rituals to have that protection. And at the same time, if it is in the bigger picture that you will get into a car accident. I had someone who got into a car accident and literally they totaled their car. They didn't have, it was something, and they ended up getting like an insurance payout, and it wasn't planned, but they got no injuries. They got a new car. I'm like, well, haven't you been wanting a new car for a long time? So interesting. Look that's an interesting way of manifesting. Great. Good on you. Right? No injuries. So, I don't know. Sometimes people can get a little bit neurotic in following some of the, in order to do this. And this story. I got to share this. I remember when I first got my harmonium, and I remember, taking it over to a friend of mine who's a musician who that is not his genre of music at all. But I'm like, I just want to learn this mantra. And so I played it, like I played the chords of it. And he's one who, without any study of music, whatever, he can hear something, he plays it. It's just his mastery. It's part of who he is, right? I remember going over to his house and I said, I want to play this. This is the song that I want to learn. I don't want to do a whole bunch of study. Can you teach me these chords? Yeah. And the same how we learn. And he's like, okay, here. Did the chords. And I remember the very first time that I brought my harmonium to this Kundalini yoga class in River West in Milwaukee. And I brought my harmonium, and I remember saying, can I share this song? Yeah, it was part of my being of like kind of being vulnerable and sharing something that I'm not great at, just learning, but I wanted to share it. And I remember after, and it was Ek Onkar. Yeah, that was the mantra, Ek Onkar, which again, I think is beautiful. Ek Onkar, the creator and creation are one. It's the same thing when I say, I am presence, and I am one with my mother, father, God. In Sanskrit, Ek Onkar, Satguru Prasad, like there's so much to it, but the essence is the creator and creation are one, right? So that's what I was singing. A woman came up to me after the class, and she was in her, all white, because all the rest of the colors are bad or whatever. I don't know, right? So this is where sometimes I'll say, like, that's not my story. That isn't my truth. I'm here to practice I'm here to practice in how it works for me, which is why, again, when I speak to people, and I'm always talking, and for children as well, constantly, sovereign beings. So you do not take something that is not meant for you. But she came up to me after, and she didn't compliment me. She said, this was, to me, it reminded me of like a religious zealot who like has to come up to you and say, have you accepted, your Lord and Jesus, like, whatever. It was the same energy, but under the blanket of Kundalini yoga. And she said, do you know the mantra that you just sang? We were taught, Yogi Bhajan or whoever said that you have to, and before you sing and utter those words, you have to do a whole cleansing and preparing, and you have to do this ritual, and you have to do this. And I looked at her and I was like, yeah, well, that doesn't apply to me. And I know she felt disrespected, but I also felt like, okay, first of all, I was still vibrating to, Ek Onkar, the creator and creation are one. And I was seeing also the cosmic joke of, okay, the creator and creation are one. And here comes another aspect of myself coming up to me going, in order to sing this song, you have to chant this 3 times, do this ritual, this kriya, and then you can sing this mantra, because it is the holiest of holy mantras. And I thought to myself, I'm glad that that's not my practice. I'm glad that that is not my truth, because I like it and it feels fantastic when I'm singing it and it's coming out of my body. And for me to have just learned it for the first time on the harmonium and shared it with a group was a big deal at the time. I don't know. This was probably like 15 years ago. I don't remember. But I do remember that experience. And I do think that it does apply to how we can overlay with our own limitations, outdated belief systems, anything can happen in those ways. And the same is true. I mean, I've lived and traveled in so many different lands, and it can be the same literally in the sense of traditions and how that goes. It's like, are you literally paying homage to dead people and keeping a tradition that is out of alignment with your soul? That's where sometimes superstition and things, you're literally not getting the point of being a divine sovereign being who literally is calling in all of the aspects, all of your power. You call it back. Yeah. On that same note, one of the teachers, and I'm not picking on Kundalini Yoga. I think Kundalini Yoga is fantastic. Okay. So I hope that you get that. I hope that you get that there's no disrespect. I am literally just sharing some experiences. The one teacher that I mentioned, who again seemed to have, probably was fleeing her religious upbringing or things in the Catholic Church that didn't resonate for her and something. But then you can also see how sometimes then they will attract also and just place other practices over their, and it's the same. Yeah, that's where when you hear me say like the NewCage movement, that's what it is. It's like, well, is it true? That's, people hear me all the time. I'm like, is it true? Is that true? And truly, if it is true for them, then it is true. But the same is true. If it's not true for me, it's not true. Period. End of story. And even if it's something that I haven't grown into yet in the understanding of my conscious, my growth, soul growth and evolution, if it's not true for me, it is not true. So anybody can run around saying anything, and that can happen with food, with what you put in your body. There's someone who, this is a good one. Maybe you'll get something from this too. Again, this practitioner, yoga teacher, being again a beautiful soul, but had a lot of distortions coming up in her field when she was talking about how she was losing her hair and like all of this stuff. And I remember just sitting in her energy, and I felt like she needed some protein, and more than what she was getting. And when I said something, I said, well, what about, I said, do you eat meat at all? And she looked at me like I was literally, like my head was spinning around, like I was the devil incarnate. And she's like, no, we do not. And she came with such a vengeance. And I'm thinking, who is in this being? So that even at that, same is true. Someone could be like, okay, which again, I don't condone like drinking, Coca-Cola, but I do remember certain times in different aspects where there was certain things that my body was going through something that it literally, it's like, okay, I want you to drink a Coke. And it was challenging like my ideas about it. So anytime I kind of step into something, I'm like, okay, I want to see how much a hold this is. Am I bringing this belief in and thinking that, oh my God, then if I eat, it would be a piece of cake or any sugar at all or meat or something. Especially if you've traveled and you've been in places where there is not access to, say, what you would normally cook with, that you normally would not use inflammatory oils. But so now the duration of your time and your assignment in this particular land or in this particular place where you are, this is what it is. This is the food that you have. This is what you have access to. Do you not also understand that you have the creator and creation are one? Your power has the ability to transmute anything. Now, is it ideal? I personally, if I am eating meat, I prefer to have the most halal, ethically sourced, grass-fed if I'm eating beef or, whatever, that it's killed honorably, that it's used in ceremony in ways that then you are ingesting it. That not only was it killed and it was killed honorably and used as an offering, but then it was also used to ingest for the entire tribe. It wasn't just this random like, oh, they're making blood sacrifices. I think sometimes people get a little carried away with their judgments when they don't understand, and then there's these elements of fear. So your ability to ask a question, to question yourself, why am I doing this? What is it? Is it necessary? Do I need to say this mantra this number of times in order to be protected when I walk out my door? That's a horrible way of leading with fear, because to me, if you think that that's true and that's the reality, then that will be your truth. And I think that's a horrible way to walk through the world. And this is why I do think we can kind of playfully address some of these things. And I will, just to kind of put a little period or a cap on the story about the teacher. There was a point over the years, I remember she was so devout and only wore white and all these things. And then as the years passed, I was no longer taking her class, but I remember what I got from her was bringing me back to my enchantress self. Yeah, the Sybil that is me, that there's aspects of myself that uses the sound, tones, and mantras, not only to clear rooms and to clear spaces in those ways, but also singing to my own cells, my own body. And I think of it even as a child, if you're singing lullabies and you're singing things, you really want to sing the most loving, beautiful things because they're listening, they're absorbing it. And so we are absorbing constantly as well. And so even if it's beautiful, and that's at one point I may say to one person, like, okay, work with this mantra. This might be good because these are the translations. See if it resonates with you. And then until for a while, but then if at the end of the day, they're coming up with a spiritual practice and I've met people like this, where literally their practice and the number of mantras that they have to get through literally take up like 4 or 5 hours. I don't even know then how you get to the rest of your day. So if you have a practice, if you have, I mean like a work practice and you're seeing clients, or you have a family and you have other things, I don't really know where there would be the time if you got to go through all of those rituals. Which again, you can take everything that I say with a grain of salt, because I myself have walked through many times. There's times where I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this particular cleanse and fast, and this is what it is, and I'm going to do this programming for myself for 30 days. This just happens to be a practice. But then after I've done the practice, I let it go. I don't have to keep saying it. If you have to keep saying it beyond the programmable place, which means, the programming, like we're crystals, like our body is, our cells receive and are programmable. So anyways, and I say this with regard to, the kids too, that they're also so open in so many ways that it's so easy when they're little to be able to make sure that you're using the right use of the word. And that can be, again, in any language, which is why I've also had, this is where I've had, ones who say they're really, even Christ consciousness. Okay. So let's say this, for example, right? Christ consciousness. It is not about a physical being person. Each being in your embodiment, in your avatar self, in your being, you have these aspects of wholeness. And so your Christ consciousness is a part of who you be. But that Christ consciousness, and I say it as an absolute truth and knowing from the experience that I've lived, it exists in all of the lands who have no idea about the story of the one you call Jesus, or the title of the Christ, right? In every single land that I have been in, and whether they were practicing Muslims, Hindus, African traditional spirituality, there are ones you can feel in their being that they are literally connected to their I am, their Christed beingness, their Christ consciousness all over the globe. So that's why sometimes I think it can be almost a trip where there was a person who said to me, because he's very heavy, and I know songs and chants in Aramaic, which is the language that Yeshua spoke when he was walking the earth, right? So the person, the being, right? beautiful. I love Aramaic. It's absolutely beautiful. But this particular person that I was talking to, he literally, when I sang something, I was saying it in Swahili, or when I was doing different grid work, remember, it's like, this has to come through in Yoruba. It has to come through in these words. And so literally my communication and direct relationship with the earth and how I was being called to send certain things into the land using the sound of my voice. When I started singing in Swahili, he immediately, because he was so he was thinking, well, I don't know what you're singing. So it's the same thing. It's the same level of fear. Well, I don't know what you're singing. And, that could be against Christ. Like, I only know this, Christed, and Aramaic and something. It's like, do you realize that Aramaic is not the only language? Yes, it's an old language, but there's many. This is where, again, when people travel, I just think it's really important to understand that sounds and words, just because it may not be your language, it's beautiful. You can sing something, and maybe the guardians and the elementals of the land appreciate this wording better. Okay, why not? Right? And yet the same is true. The same beings will go and be like, okay, and they want to convert somebody who is of another spiritual tradition or faith, and they're invoking their own God presence and praying in the ways that they know how to pray. And then because it's outside and it's not in English or Aramaic or something, that all of a sudden that same being who's spouting oneness and unity consciousness is all of a sudden going into aspects of fear and closing down to other traditions. So this is where, again, I am literally a child who is mixed beyond mixed. I have a lot of different bloodlines that run through me, as well as traditions that are part of my being. So it is just interesting. That's why, again, I don't argue with anybody, but it's interesting when you address some of those things. And I do think that's been what's coming up for you, is that some of the mantras, even as much as on one side, you're going, this is beautiful, I like this, I want to learn this. And then you're practicing, and then there's maybe some ancestors, some energies that are also a part of you, right? You're also not separate from your ancestors. So there might be a few in there that are going, that yoga is of the devil, or that is outside of God that we know. You have to call God by this name. Are you kidding me? we can call God, Goddess, absolute. Now I'm thinking any name, any personal name, because this is where I say, if you do not see the divine in all, you do not see the divine at all. If you do not see God in all, you do not see God, period. And so if ones are saying, no, but you must call God this name, do you know how many languages there are? Do you know how many? Anyways, I'm going to stop on the tangent. I hope that addressed some of the things, about mantras, in the sense that it's you're not calling on a deity, you're not idol worshiping, and again, only take what resonates for you, if that is, or find something that is in alignment. I just know that your initial excitement with the mantras themselves, or specific ones, you're like, oh, I really like that. And I've had this happen in different places where literally I'll be singing something and say it's in Swahili. This was just on one of there's so many lands and so many countries. When I was in Mexico. It was one of my last assignments in the sense of grid working. And I remember going to a group. It was a yoga class, and they were doing some mantras. I think something, I don't know, whatever. And I remember it was close. It was convenient. And I met the woman, and she said, do you have a mantra or something that you want to share? And it was in Yoruba, and it was a chant to the water, to the waters. And it was beautiful, and it was easy. So it was one that I could pick that was also it was easy enough for the ones that were in the room to learn. Because again, sometimes it can get complicated, right? In anything. So it was easy. And then I remember the next day, someone had said they were going to Guatemala, and there was some midwives. I remember this was also part of the path as well. It's like, okay, are you going to go meet these Guatemalan midwives? And I was already getting to the point, right, where I'm sick of traveling. No. So I recorded the prayer and the chant to the waters, right? And said, no, but you're going, here, take this and bring it. You can bring the sound of my voice and I will go, but I'm tired. I'm getting to the point where the logistics of going from where I was in San Cris to Guatemala and just the journey itself, I had completed my assignments in the sense of, my own path and initiations as far as that is concerned. But through the recording, they went and they brought that mantra, they brought that Yoruba chant to the land, and they were doing all of the things, and it was beautiful, and I didn't have to go. That was also, again, creator and creation are one. Anything or anyone that comes into your field, you get to choose as well. You do have a say in it. That's part of co-creation, right? So that was just a little mini version for me of just saying no. And that is kind of where I've been vibing really in the last few years, that I don't really have assignments in those ways that took place in the first 20 years of my path as a priestess. Now, I literally just check in with the cells in my body and my being, and it's like, do I feel like it? Do I want to or not? And it's so much fun. So anyways, there's my big long ramble and rant about mantras and some of the things that I kind of felt coming up in your frequency and in your field with regard to it. So hopefully that helps. And like I said, it's important that you only take what is useful for you. Yeah. Kick what is not resonant. Blah, 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 blah. One love.